All right, this is our weekly all hands for October 23, and if you don't know, we're going to use this time to sync up on work going on, eliminating blockers, and prioritizing our week. First, looking at our lag metrics, we had 99 in transaction volume last week, so that's down 234. And on the lead metric side, we had 4 weekly transacting users. That's down as well. 0 new users, which honestly I'm a bit disappointed about. Actually, let me just double check. I think I checked this morning, but yeah, 0 new users, which is disappointing. Makes me wonder if our sign up flow is working, but it was working the last time we checked. And 2 communities deployed, so we're up at 8 communities. Team-wide announcements. There's a little pitch video here that I threw into the team chat. If you haven't seen it, take a look. I could do the pitch for us here again, but I haven't made the updates based upon the feedback I got, so I don't know how useful that is. And an article from Hero. So I read it this morning, and it is definitely an improvement over the one you sent me in DM originally. And I think it's like a little bit more clear to me now. So one thing that I thought we might do is have a little discussion about the discussion Hero and I were having in DMs in a little bit more public way. So that's something that we'll do when we get to the bottom of the meeting minutes here. But yeah, thanks for that, Hero, for shipping that. No new members, so we'll just go straight down into the milestone perspective. 10 weekly transacting users. On the user interviews, we had our last user interview last week. We need to do synthesis now, so Zudi Bear and I are both going to do it. I probably won't get a chance to do it until next week. But ultimately, we already have some outputs based upon what we've seen from them. The big one being, or the most, not the big one being as much as, but like the most pressing or most priority one being those lifecycle emails. I can't even tell you how many people are just like, oh, I just forgot about it. And shouldn't you guys email me more? So what we're going to be doing is creating on 2 sides of the funnel, on the kind of, hey, you've already signed up. Everyone's going to start receiving a monthly statement. Hopefully by next month. I still need to spec it. And Tom, actually, I could probably use your help on this because I want to spend most of my time on the top of funnel. But potentially I can code this up to next week. But I'll spec it first, essentially like a a monthly balance, which says your balance, the rewards you had. I don't think in the first release we'll have like all of the transactions, but just like how much you spent this month and your balance, just that kind of thing to get people kind of being like, oh yeah, I have a balance. And then on the other hand, on the top of funnel, we're going to have some more lifecycle emails around, hey, you've signed up, but you haven't even tried to load the card. Do you need some help? Hey, you've signed up, but you haven't even, you've signed up and loaded the card, but you haven't spent anything. Do you want some help? So that's kind of what those lifecycle emails are. That's the first output from the user interviews, but there's definitely more to come. On the user analytics side, this has been up here forever. I have one last query to add to the dashboard. Probably I'll add it next week. Lifecycle emails we already talked about. After talking to a bunch of communities, it feels like, and Tom, I haven't talked to you about this. I probably should have talked to you about it before, but it feels like in-app voting might be the thing that we might want to work on next in terms of like the next big feature. The only thing is that there's like a lot of, well, we need to talk about like how technically we're going to accomplish it because we want to set ourselves up for the future. But anyways, I don't think this should be a surprise for you, Tom, but yeah, does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's definitely one of the next ones up on the roadmap for me. So I'm certainly looking at getting some specifications to implement that. Should be something we can work on.
The fun thing for in-app voting as well is that since everyone's getting BCard, and it's just a point right now, but we could turn it into a token. But since everyone's getting BCard, we could literally have votes for everyone. Like votes, like for instance, we could have a vote for, hey, what should be the next community out of these 4 communities? Do a vote in-app, right? And so that it could be fun to do these kind of general votes that go across all users and start using notifications to get people engaged and involved. So there's a nice little gamification aspect that we can use as well, and it's all based upon that idea of people holding BCard, which I think is pretty cool as well.
Yeah, maybe it's something around the idea of building a simple like polling widget or something that in our dashboard we can just sort of deploy a simple type of like voting interface polling widget that goes to specific token holders. So if you are a holder of, BCard, for example, would be everybody, then show up on the screen, the poll as it is, whatever the timeframes that are specified or whatever specifications are set for that particular poll. I think that we could probably do that in a pretty short turnaround if we
So
put
I
our minds
think,
to it.
and I actually think that we should probably just use Snapshot as our poll dashboard. So then communities, we can just be like, hey, use Snapshot if you want to run a poll. It's
Oh
and
yeah, if we're leveraging like tools already, I was just thinking in order to incorporate like the points style, like voting or whatever, without having anything to be on chain, having something like a little internal to our token metrics.
yeah, something to talk about. But I mean, if we can leverage like a full, the nice thing about Snapshot is they have so many different kinds of voting mechanisms, and so it's just like, yeah, and they're iterating on it too, which means it's going to get better, better, and better. We're just going to show the simplified view for users, and so that's interesting to me because that's really hitting on our like the idea of bridging the UX gap between Web3 and the real world. For a regular user, they don't need to connect their wallet. They don't need to do all this kind of stuff. They just need to vote based upon the governance weight they have.
Yeah, I mean, if there's APIs to hook into some of those tools that they've been pulling, that would be pretty sweet.
Cool. So we'll talk about it a little bit more from a technical implementation perspective. I'm not really sure what's possible, but I do think that it's possible for us to show snapshot votes in our front end and even vote for our users depending on how we set up their wallets. Sweet. So that's in-app voting. We'll go down to 10 users a week. We ran a big launch for OMF. We had we went on Twitter, Farcaster, and LinkedIn. We coordinated with Octane, OMF, and Bankless. We actually had a ton of engagement compared to our normal posts, and yet 0 new signups. And so, like, we had, it's funny too because we had a much smaller launch announcement for Hire, and we still got like 3 or 4 new signups. So I think like the motivation is a little bit different with OMF. This is something we wanted to test, right? So this data is still good data. But in general, I would say like the launch was much more serious for OMF, and we had like a lot more. I think the launch was a success in terms of the coordination aspect of it, but it didn't yield any new users. And so the difference between Hire and OMF is in Hire, there's this kind of promise that you're going to be earning tokens, whereas in OMF, there's not much, right? Like you're donating, and maybe it's not enough. But this is something we had kind of already hypothesized. So, anyways, it's something to think about. It's something to think about, and we definitely want to check out some other communities as well. But we're gonna need to think about this as we go forward. Octant Accelerator, we have our pitch tomorrow. I need to go through the material and update our positioning and other things after. The nice thing about the accelerator is that they have like really great high quality speakers who are like dropping bombshells every 2 minutes. The bad thing is that we have like 1 or 2 a day plus homework and other things like that. And so it's been really difficult to synthesize their feedback. So I'm hoping next week we can really start kind of getting more to the groundwork. The reason we got into this accelerator is really for growth. That's how they pitch the accelerator. That's what we really wanted to get out of it. And some of the things that they were telling us in the second week, I still haven't synthesized 2 weeks later. The big thing for us is positioning. We really need to understand, what is it that we're trying to sell and how we kind of stack up against alternatives. And if we can kind of experiment with that and understand that and kind of align around that, I think it's going to be really important for us. The pitch deck is the first thing that I've done around that kind of idea in recent times. That very first, I don't know how many people you've actually seen the pitch, but the very first slide is banks suck, right? And so it's going back to this idea of bankless messaging, this idea that there's something off about the world and we need to fix it. This is the messaging we're going back to because, we're finding we're not getting a lot of traction through our go-to market of communities. So we really need to understand this messaging and bring our own audience as we can. Now that we have, a couple of high-quality communities, we still probably need a couple more, but the intent would be that after we add a bunch of communities, any random person who shows up on that BCard community page is going to find a community that actually appeals to them. And then in that case, bringing our own audience, which is actually interested in the same things that we are, will start to be more effective. So we still need a couple communities, still missing some stuff there. We still need to understand our positioning and messaging. But in general, we're adding these building blocks as we go. Finally, speaking of those communities, we added 2 new communities, Purple, Permissionlessly, and OMF. We've only communicated OMF. We still have a little bit of juice left in Purple. And I followed up with TreeGens who have not yet launched their token. I really like TreeGens because this idea that, hey, by using your card, you are now planting trees, mangrove trees in, I believe it's Indonesia. That's really powerful, I think. I think like Ecosia is a search engine that every time you make a search, it plants a tree. And there's another one. There's like this wooden credit card which plants trees for your thing. So there are standalone cards which are doing exactly this. So it's a pretty good community for us. Yeah, I agree, Hero. And that's I think why we really need to experiment on this messaging and really like nail down the exact wording. It's gonna take work. Let's just put it that way. I also chatted with a community called C3. It's like a women-based community, it's in Mexico, and that's why it's C3. It's like Yes3. And they push their community info already. They have a designer as well, so we could get a C3 card coming up pretty soon. It would also be interesting, similarly, there's this organization called SheFi. So I'm trying to make inroads with their community as well, and C3 said that they could help us get into there. Community intake, what kind of community should we be aiming for? I think this is an important one, right? Like, we recently had this OMF one. Not that it's like a bad execution at all. I actually think it's really good for us to, in a lot of different ways, including like our positioning. Hey, we actually have this 5013C registered not-for-profit, and they are interested in like they actually worked with us. That's going to open doors with other partners in the future, right? Like that's credibility for us. So it's a good thing that we have them, and I don't think that we are useful enough to them right now. And so I really think that when we're talking about which communities can we serve, we need to think about like what communities can we serve right now, what communities can we serve if we add a feature or two, and what communities do we really want to serve. So it's something that we need to think about a little bit more, but that's kind of that. Moving into the task perspective. And go down here. Joke race. This was a joke race, which is the one that we were in. It's done. I did claim. I'm going to leave this on here because I claimed, but I didn't send it to the multisig yet. I'm going to do this. Speaking of the multisig, clean up multisig. Right now the multisig is a 3.6. Is a 3.6. Only 3 of those are actually on Panama Foundation. Success criteria. Reduce signers down to 3. Reduce quorum down to 2, 3. So this is what I'm going to be doing with multisig. I'm also thinking Safe actually has like a new method to have a cross-chain address. So replace the cross-chain addresses with the same as mainnet. And I'll put this as optional. We'll see if it actually works for us. So this is something that I wanted to do for a little while, and I'll stick into here. Not super important though. All right. We'll go down. So this joke race, yeah, I need to send the funds to the multisig. All right, so I'll do that this week. Should not take long. Sunny Awards and Dow Spring Grants, I kind of like left this on the table. Yeah, just didn't have time to do it. Joke race we talked about. Come with a demo for Octant Demo Day. This is actually the most important thing, so I'll stick this at the top. Thank you for everyone who watched and gave their feedback. I really appreciate that. Open Medicine Foundation. So it is launched. Co-marketing campaign is done. Now we just need to kind of like understand the success. I'm going to leave this on here for now, but what I'll do is I'll put it into the blocked waiting and needs feedback because there's no active work. I'm going to just let it marinate for a week before we go any further. Purple. Communities launched on prod. Oop. We have not. Come on. We have not launched a co-marketing campaign, so that is to be done. Lifecycle emails, I will say, is more important than this. Run a joke race. Well, Corrupted. I mean, maybe you want to give an update, Corrupted. I think I took this from you, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I tried to start a joke race, but the website bugged out and I was not able to create one. That's pretty much where it ended up.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing happened with me. Links tried as well twice, and it didn't work. What? Can I ask what wallet you were using?
I tried without a wallet because it didn't seem necessary, and then with a MetaMask.
MetaMask browser extension?
Yeah, Firefox add-on.
Okay. Links used Rainbow Chrome. Core used Firefox MetaMask. Yeah, and so they're basically like, strange, it works for us. Can you try again? So, I'll try again, but it's just not my top priority. We're going to move this way down the priority list, actually. So I'll stick it here. I'll add it to myself. So that's not on it's not on your mind at least. I'll try to run it later. But yes, we'll go from here. Going down this list, how fiat-based orgs can benefit from BCard. Oh, and you actually have a little article for us. Do you want to give us an update on this, Hero?
Yeah, totally. And so, as Links mentioned, I drafted this thing Monday, Tuesday, sent it to him as a DM, and he's like, there's, this blockchain language you got in here, man. I don't know, And so we went back and forth a little bit in DMs and tried to revise most of that language out of there, but not all of it. And so this is kind of I guess to go back to the article, really, it's like an article that I would say is largely geared toward off-chain communities, not just community leaders, but like any stakeholders, right? So like in your typical community-based org, you're going to have like the nonprofit, the charity, the org, whatever the structure of that is, doesn't really matter. It can be for profit too. Health clinics, sports leagues, community, senior centers, like whatever, right? I mean, there's a huge list of folks like that, right? And in my mind, bankless card is a really natural thing. Sorry, BCard is a really natural sort of product for these kinds of things because these orgs are typically made up of like really impassioned stakeholders, right? Like whether you're a donor, whether you're a board member, whether you're a service provider or a service recipient, like you're all there because you care, not because you're getting like some fat paycheck, right? And so I think in particular, like this way of taking money from interchange revenue, essentially taking money from banks and rerouting it to these orgs is like really appealing, right? And so that was kind of the focus, like in terms of the audience of the article. And really, it's like a short, I try not to write too much stuff over 500 words these days. I think it's slightly over that. And yeah, it's just really like, here is, the problem all these kind of orgs face, lack of funding, lack of stakeholder participation, right? I mean, a lot of donors just write a check and leave. A lot of people who receive services can't afford to donate, et cetera, right? So this is a way for folks to sort of like get more aligned with the org, engage in the org in this new way, right? And so the question is, I think in the article and what Links and I want to talk about is like, what kind of language is appropriate to use that implicates, sort of this tech that most of us love so much, right? And do you abstract all the way out that language, or do you include, a little bit just to sort of like let folks know that there's some magic happening in the background, et cetera. So, that's what the article is. I know that NF looked at it. I don't know if NF is here.
He's not. He's at a shoot right now.
Cool. So he's taking photos, and Links took a look at it, and the feedback's in the channel. His basic feedback is it sounds a lot like Hero. That's no surprise. And I still think we disagree on, the quantity and perhaps the quality of the blockchain language around it. And so Links thought it might be nice.
I actually think we agree. I think it was because I was looking at it from a different lens. I was looking at it from a different audience perspective.
Fair. Cool. But I think Links, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So like, you thought this would make an interesting vehicle for BCard to get aligned around some of this language and around the messaging to off-chain communities. And so I think that would be a cool combo to have. Do you want to kick that off, Links, or do you want to talk about the article?
I want to finish the tactical, and I want to finish the tactical, and then I want to get into it. And then I get into that exact discussion. But I just wanted to, because you were saying like that idea of taking revenue away from banks, I did write an article about this. I think it's not great, but I left it as a link for you in this Asana project, just to give you like kind of like this old look at something. I think you've read it before, but anyways.
I did, yeah. I remember editing it actually.
Yeah.
And I looked at it when I was writing the article too. It's where I got that thing about billions and billions in interchange revenue. So yeah, I think that's like, that's the crux, right? Especially if you're not going to implicate crypto or attempt to tokenize these communities. That was one question I had for Links, if there's been any attempts to kind of work with partners to help off-chain communities tokenize, right?
OMF is very interested in tokenizing. But they are not sure how, when, or why. But they actually hired someone to advise them on this. And so we're working with them to figure stuff out. I think like in-app voting will be the first way that we do it. But like the thing is like, when if they tokenize, they don't want it to affect their kind of like fiat space and stuff like that. So like for that reason, when we are talking externally specifically to, their audiences or stuff like that, like we won't call it crypto, right? Like we'll just say you're earning voting rights or something, and you can use them in our app, right? And so that's why, like, depending on our audience, we might talk to them differently. So like OMF is actually interested in this, and so like when I realized that the article was more geared towards community leaders, it kind of made more sense. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, because they're actually interested in that stuff. Originally, I thought we were like going for end users, and their end users, they don't really care, right? Like. Does that make sense? Anyways, we should talk about this in the discussion, but
yeah, it makes sense. Not sure I agree, but yeah, good discussion for later for sure.
All right. So next step so we talked to this for the user testing. Zudi and I ran our last user test. We ran the interviews. Next up is to analyze the results. And so hopefully by next week, we'll have a little something to share with the team. All right. And user analytics, I literally just have one transaction left to put up. And so I'll do that. Plan a pizza party in Toronto. This is done. So I will mark that one as complete. Woohoo. October patron email. Yeah, I wanted to get this out this week. Hopefully I still can. Knock on wood. We shall see. Worst case, I'll do it next week. Partnership pitch deck. I feel like this isn't happening right now, so I'm just going to put it into next up for now. Competitive analysis. So we actually got an output on this. Added a report to Google Doc. Yeah, and so it's right here. Competitor analysis. Okay, great. Yeah, so I need to review this. If anyone else wants to review it as well, feel free. But yeah, there is some. So this needs to be reviewed, actually. I'm going to stick this into needs feedback. And it's going to be me who has to give feedback. Links needs to give feedback. Okay, great. All right, next up, why BCard one pager? Oh, sorry, not that. Arcusty, contributor rewards and payroll. Did you get a chance to look at this?
Yeah, so I did actually review it. I looked at the bounty stuff. I don't know if I'm looking at the right sheet though, but I only have comment privilege.
This one here.
Yeah. So
okay.
So I couldn't update what I had done, but I'm ready to like discuss this.
Yeah.
I guess the one. So I looked at what's outstanding in terms of like actual payments on the project stuff, and most of it's deferred. But I haven't actually. So I guess another thing is the role-based compensation.
Mm-hmm. All of it should be in the Asana, accounting. So basically, the job is to clear out the accounting inbox more so than anything else.
Okay, so I can go. Yes, I did not review the role stuff, so I don't know what's that?
So all of the role stuff should be in here. So for each of these weeks,
Okay.
if it's checked off, then they get that amount. And so you see, if it's not checked off, then they wouldn't, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so hopefully, if the information is missing, and why is this missing here? Actually, this should all be here. Anyways, if you're missing information, just let me know. But the idea is that this inbox right here will be our point of communication.
Okay.
Like this will be like our interface. So we put stuff in here, and then you hopefully have enough information to take stuff out of here. And if you don't, then you need to tell me so that I can put better information on going into the inbox.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. So I'll review that, and then when we have a chance to meet up for the ops meet again, then I'll be up to speed.
Cool, sounds good. Yeah, so tomorrow is the last ops meeting that I will miss. Is the pitch day, so we kind of have to be there the whole time, and it's literally the entire morning from like 9 to 12. So, yeah. But after that, we can be back into a regular schedule on the ops side.
Yeah, but I signed up for the Luma for that. So
Yeah, if you haven't signed up for the Luma, please do, because you get to vote on who gets some of the 15 ETH prize, and actually they're increasing that prize as we go. So let me just pop in that Luma link for you into the chat. Yeah, so I think like you have to connect your wallet, but then once you connect your wallet, they're just gonna airdrop you an NFT, which gives you access. So even if you can't come for the full thing, even if you just put your wallet in there, you'll probably still get a vote. All right, so it's in there. Thanks for the update, Arcusti. Down to the BCard one pager. Hopefully, like the work that I'm doing on the pitch is really around this kind of why. So I would say that I'm. Let's just put it here. Pitch work is helping with this. It's not quite there yet, and like you said, Hero, Bank Suck is not super a super great rallying cry necessarily, but I just think that the workshopping is good. Clean up the multi-sig, we already talked about this. Pull together and hire, just doing some waiting on some email updates for those, and updating the website. So Bobo, I didn't get a chance to review the website. I mean, I did look at it very briefly, and honestly, it's very similar to the existing website and a little bit better. So we could probably ship it. But I'm just waiting to give it a full review. Are you using is it all on the current GitHub, Bobo?
GM, sir.
GM.
Yeah,
Oh.
I haven't shipped this to the GitHub yet, but I can do that right away today.
Yeah, I think honestly, the sooner we can ship it, the better. And so I think next week I'll get a chance to actually do more of a deep dive on it. Honestly, a lot of the small things I might just fix myself, in the code. If I'm just I wish this text was a few pixels smaller. I'll just do that, right, instead of telling you. So if it's in GitHub, it'll make it go faster.
Okay, I will do that today.
All right, cool. So Hero, one of the things you're mentioning in the site there is, can we do something for off-chain communities? One of the tools we have available to us in Mailjet, and it doesn't have to be Mailjet, but just in general, we have kind of what you see is what you get landing pages that we can create and attach to our domain. So I do think that in general, if we are doing marketing campaigns for specific types of communities, like off-chain communities versus on-chain communities, we may have this kind of language issue, then it might make sense for us to have a separate landing page, which has similar design and stuff like that. But it's all the messaging is kind of geared towards differently. And this might be a way as well that we can test that messaging. I think in general, when we're talking about positioning and messaging, it doesn't really stand unless we test it. And I'm not sure of the best way to test it right now. I can tell you that what we have right now is just not working. and so we do need to iterate on it. And I think that like those individual words really matter when we talk about it. I think like when we're speaking about the core why, we can take some time and understand it amongst ourselves and create this kind of shared understanding. But when we are externally communicating that, we really need to worry about those words. Those individual words have like such a big meaning because we really only have, one shot to get that user's attention. And anyways, all this to say that we need to work on and iterate this, but it's really missing that tentpole, which is like, why are we all here? And this is something we've been asking ourselves in this call, and we just need to kind of synthesize into something we all can rally behind. Anyways, Bobo, I'm hoping that by next week we can get something shippable on this website. It's really me who needs to review it. So what I will do is I'll put this in the to review section as well. And I think it goes above the competitive analysis here, but at links to review at Bobo to put in GitHub. Cool. All right, that's it for tasks. Unless there are other tasks that people are doing that aren't on this list. Jost, were you interested in that audiogram idea? Do you want me to throw a task up to create an audiogram for this meeting?
Sure. I'm not sure what we can pull out of it, but yeah, I can give it a shot. Depends on what you're trying to pull out of it, but yeah.
The idea would be
that's a roundabout way of saying
discussion. Yeah, the idea would be that in the discussion, like nothing in here, but in the discussion, like, the last half hour, hopefully we get to a point where it's like the last half hour, 20 minutes of every meeting, we're having like a talk about kind of our values or where we sit. There's something interesting that will be said by someone. And the audiogram is like taking like 5 to 10 seconds of this 60-minute meeting. So finding 5 to 10 seconds that are somewhat interesting and turning it into an audiogram, no matter who says
it. Well, yeah,
it.
that's the challenging part.
Oh, what's the challenging part? Is to find 5 or 10 interesting seconds?
Well, just you have to re-listen and all of it's I don't know, these things sound like, oh yeah, it's just take a couple of minutes.
Okay, well let's
No, I think that's a useful idea, and I'd be happy to do a couple examples of that and see how long it takes to find it.
All right, see if we can make an audiogram for the weekly meet. Yeah, I mean, it's really just an experiment more than anything. We'll see if it works, and if it doesn't, we'll do something else.
Yeah, and then what we were talking about before, and kind of that I did get a chance to listen to it, your pitch for Octant, the YouTube piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounded kind of conversational, and I liked what you were doing there. Did you have a script on that, or was that largely off?
I do have a script, yeah.
Of the two? Okay.
I do have a script, and now I'm trying to make it look more and more like I don't have a script, but I do need to edit it a little bit because first of all, it's long, and second of all, people said that it was meandering in the beginning, so I really need to tighten that up.
Yeah, so is that available somewhere to look at? I mean, I can always.
Let me send you.
But
I have a script over here somewhere. Darn it, where did I put it? I literally have it open on a thing. I just have so many of these things open.
But I liked it because it was conversational, but I would agree it was a little meandering, maybe a little long. And so I would just say tighten it up and maybe a little more forceful.
A little bit more forceful. Say more.
It almost seemed like you were talking to yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, that's more in terms of projection and just but I like the conversational tone of it. You know what I mean? I mean, it came across like even though I knew it was. So I think you're doing a good job with that aspect of it.
Cool. Yeah. I mean,
it didn't hold my attention, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's fair enough. That's good feedback. The context of this is that there are 15 pitches, 5 minutes each, and people said if you really want us to listen, don't make it sound like a pitch.
Right.
And so that's I mean, we'll see, right? Like I really need
It's a
to
hard
do
balance. It's a hard
it
balance.
is, it's yeah, and I'm not expecting to knock it out of the park on the first one, but it would be really nice. Anyways, I'm going to spend most of the day refining it today. So hopefully I'll have a V2 that's even better by the end of the day today.
All right, cool.
But yeah, I said I dropped it in. I dropped a link to the strategy doc there, and we should see it. Next up, we'll go into the task perspective. And what did we ship last week? So I shipped a pitch. Hero shipped a draft article. I worked through the Octant Accelerator, and we had some pretty good calls. If you want to take a look at the notes, feel free. I talked to C3 about getting a card, and they actually shipped us their information already. Zudi and myself ran a user test. Tom and I ran down and fixed a Nashi caching bug that Vercel introduced somewhere along the pipeline. Tom shipped the analytics updates to the TX API server to begin analysis of TX volume per user in anticipation of messaging requirements for periodic and monthly feedback to email. Nice, Tom. I love how you're anticipating this. Tom and Link shipped 2 points collecting communities to production. Tom processed a couple of manual rewards claim, could be a handful more for validation. And yeah, anything else anyone shipped that we want to call out here? Oh yeah, oh no, we did say that Hero shipped an article. Sweet. Wow, let's get into the fun part. How much have you used blockchain language? And so Hero and I kind of touched on this already. There is this kind of idea that BCard is going to bridge the UX gap between Web3 and the real world. The intent with BCard has always been to bring more people into the ecosystem. So people who don't know anything about blockchain necessarily. I think like the way that we normally call them are crypto curious consumers. These are people who have a desire to unlock some sort of use case that works in crypto, but they don't have the time or the technical ability or the gumption or whatever it is. There's something blocking them. And there is, throughout all of this, there is a kind of assumption or bias that our team has that Web3 UX sucks. I mean, I still think that's the case. There are a couple of apps who are making it, usable, but in general, I just looking through Joke Race. This is a public meeting, so I won't go off too bad on Joke Race. But like ultimately, I actually think Joke Race UX is quite bad. The fact that you have to select from like 30 different chains, which chain are you going to run your contest on, and then like the idea that this kind of like you can't tell the difference between what your input is and the other things. Like the UX is just not good, and it's very normal for an industry in this stage, but it's something that BCard wants to make better. And so bridging the UX gap between Web3 and the real world includes the language that we use when we're talking to users, and we have a couple of different audiences that we're talking about. It depends who we're talking about, but there is who we're talking to, but like specifically for users of the app, there's this idea that you should be able to use the app without ever needing to have a Web3 wallet, understand what a seed phrase is or anything like that. And if you are interested, maybe you're not interested and you just use it like that, that's fine. But if you are interested, there are ways for you to learn more. There are ways for you to go deeper right there in the app. Anyways, that's kind of setting the stage for this. The reason I brought it up was because Hero's article, I would say the first draft had a lot more blockchain-specific language. But yeah, Hero, I don't know. Maybe I would love for you to give your point of view, so it's not just me talking.
Yeah. And so, my point of view on kind of language and blockchain and stuff, I mean, almost like regardless of audience, is this technology is it's fucking magical, right? And it's what brought us all here. I still think that old saying about came for the tech, stayed for the community is true for a lot of folks, right? And one thing that like has pissed me off for the last couple of years, it's like so many terrible humans conspired to give crypto a bad name through, massively fraudulent deeds, right? Almost on a larger scale than any Ponzi we've ever seen, right? More than Bernie Madoff and his hundreds of billions, right? And so as a part of that, in addition to sort of just like general mainstream media distrust, government obviously has its own issues with it, etc. Like crypto's got a bad rap. And a lot of that's, totally rightfully deserved. 99.999% of this shit is like a huge scam, right? But it's that like small little part that I'm still convinced, changes the world, And for me, it's like, I don't know, it kind of hurts my heart a bit when everyone, and this is not just BCard, I mean, it's like almost everyone building products in the space, like wants to like abstract away crypto, not just on the UI UX front, which I think makes total sense, right? Like no one wants to ever use MetaMask if they don't have to, right? Not even Rabby, even though it's better. You don't want to worry about that shit. It's gross, you know. It is just like, oh my God. But like, I don't think that's the same as, you know, like being interested in new things, being a curious human, like wondering what this is all about, right? And if you like, you know, if all the language that we use, and we like in a real broad sort of Web3 sense, you know, abstracts away the technology behind it, like it just does a massive disservice to the amazing stuff that this technology does, you know? And so like in my mind, like part of, I guess in some ways, like, you know, if I go back far enough in my lineage, like I come from teachers, and part of me like always wants to educate folks like around the technology a little bit, right? Even if it's just like in really simple surface level stuff, you know, even if it's just like the idea of introducing this thing called like the blockchain, or this thing called, you know, Web3, you know, not like immutable, decentralized, permissionless systems. I mean, that's like confusing to people here full time already, right? So I mean, it makes no sense to average users. It makes no sense to like, it makes zero sense to people outside of crypto, and that's fine, right? Like you don't need that language. But like I do think like people are inherently curious about what they're using and kind of how it works, you know. And when I was talking with Links, I mean, the analogy I use, which I think stands pretty good, you know, it's like everyone sort of knows in a real surface level way, like how the internet works, right? Like you sort of have like these IP provider, you know, these IPF, whatever they are, you know what I mean? The ISP providers, you know, your email's got some POP or some IMAP, you know, you got some SSH encryption, you know, because you see the little lock and you got in the certificates that pop up when you connect to banks, ironically. And then, you know, so you have this rough familiarity with sort of how these computers talk to each other, right? But you don't understand how it works. I mean, no one understands that stuff, right? I barely understand that. And so when I think about like, you know, writing articles or anything that involves this technology, like I think it's important to reference it like just a little bit for a couple of reasons. One, like it softens them to, you know, being, I mean, to being curious about what you're doing, because it's sort of still new and novel, even though it's, you know, 15, 16-year-old tech, maybe even 25 or 30-year-old tech, depending on how you think about it. But like more importantly, like one of my personal missions is to like make crypto cool again, right? Like I still think the folks in the space are the most interesting, cool folks I've ever met, right? And like it's just a bunch of assholes who gave it a bad name. So part of like my secret heart mission is to sort of like change the narrative around, you know, what crypto is, you know. It's not just a bunch of scammers, you know, in a boiler room, you know, trying to extract max value from people. It is that too, but like it's also, you know, this idea that together we can build technology that sort of like empowers us in ways that wasn't possible before it. Not possible using, you know, standard web technology, not possible, you know, with the Web 2, you know, social stuff, but totally is possible with blockchain. And so like when you get rid of all that language.
1 second there, because I think like that is the key. Like that, what you just said, like this stuff is possible with this technology and not possible with that other technology. I actually think that that is the kind of like differentiating, benefiting factor. And I do think we should write about that and expose that kind of stuff. And I don't think it's necessarily the same thing as saying like people need to know what TCP and SSH are. I actually disagree with you there. I think most people don't know how the internet works, and most people don't want to know how the internet works. They just want it to work for them.
I'm not saying that they know how it works, but they're familiar that technology is sort of there. Just because it's like, you know, you go set up a new Google account, right? And like, you know, you got to select your IMAP settings, your POP settings. You know, every time you see those little certificates pop up on the web, like it references SSH encryption, even if you have no idea what that is, right? But like these words around the tech flash up all the time when you're online, even if you have no sense of what that shit means, right? Similarly, like you don't really need to know how blockchains work, but like if you have a couple of words associated with it that pop up, you know, when you're in part of that world, I think that's good enough, right? And if people are curious around it, they can go find out more, you know?
Exactly. And I think that like that's one of the keys as well, is that if people are curious, there should be a string for them to pull on. We should be providing that string for them to pull on, right? I think that if they're not curious, then they don't need to pull that string, and it's very unobtrusive. It's there, and one of the things I think is that what we should be explaining to people, like our role is in some ways like showing them what blockchain can do for them, not telling them how it works necessarily. But hey, if you want to know how it works, you can click on this link. Does that make sense?
Right.
It's more about this is what it can do for you.
That's totally it, right? But without having that language, like some language around that stuff, right? Then you can't do that. You can't give the opportunity for curious people to learn more, And so, yeah, I mean, so like abstracting away all blockchain language, doesn't provide the opportunity for folks and doesn't give them that chance for the magic to happen for them too, But I don't know, like I guess in the end, the TLDR abstracted away on the UI UX front, 1000%. But when like communicating to public facing folks in a public facing way, rather, like have some of that language around, like not too much, not any real detail around how the tech works, but just like pepper in some of those keywords, here and there.
Yeah, and I'm not anti that. I think like my bigger issue is when people use these big words and then and like the audience's eyes glaze over. Like I remember one thing really poignantly. We were at a Bank of South community call. People were talking about a very technical thing, okay, and just the people in the community call started to like trend downwards by a lot. Like people were leaving left, right, and center. And the feedback I gave to people after the fact was just like, it was really technical and people started leaving. And the feedback I got back from them is like, no, these people must understand this technology if we want to go bankless. I'm not going to dumb it down for anyone. As a human, they have to understand this. And I'm just like, no, that's not. I mean, of course, you as a technology person is going to want like some sort of like technocracy, but ultimately that's not is what's going to get adopted, right? Like I think like there's this kind of wet dream from technical people in this space that everyone in the world is going to somehow learn some of these like cryptographic concepts, and I think that's just unrealistic, right? Like I think ultimately, if we really want adoption, we need to bridge the gap. We need to like present blockchain in a language that people not only can understand, but can feel some emotional resonance with. And that is a challenge. That is interesting. And that is something that we can do here at BCard. Does that make sense? Yeah, let's go to the first thing.
I agree 100% on that. People just do not give a shit. They're busy. They're busy. Why do I want to use this card? Well, we redirect some of the fees to your community instead of your bank. And in fact, it can be a very small community. Oh. They don't give a shit about blockchain. They know there's banks. They're always going to use a bank. I'm talking about average, normal people. They have a bank, they have a wallet full of credit cards, or they have a virtual wallet where they tap to pay. And then they get rewards, whether it's cash back or travel insurance or, I don't know, 5% back at the grocery store this week, this month.
Yeah, we have a tough line too, in that we also can't compete on benefits that users are really interested in. So we need to kind of go back to this idea that like, hey, we're banding together to do something different. Like we can't exist without this, like to Hero's point, we can't exist without this technology either. So we need to somehow straddle the line between here's the benefit to you and here's the benefit that you cannot get elsewhere. And that really comes from blockchain.
Yeah, so the benefit from blockchain is that it enables even the smallest community to be able to capture some of those fees that are being paid anyway, right? I mean, that's something that makes sense, I think, to a lot of people without inserting any language about anything technical. People understand fees, people understand there's middlemen. They get that part.
It was interesting to me that something related to that. People like we don't need to capture fees. You actually don't need blockchain. Like you're using TradFi to capture those fees, and that could go to a fiat account. The really interesting thing that can't be done is that, hey, the more you use it, the more you contribute, the more say you have in the way this organization is run. And that really can't be accomplished without that in-app voting that Tom's working on. But that is something that at Bankless DAO, the first time you got tipped those tokens, that was for me the aha moment. Like I was just like, oh, how do I get this bank? Okay, I'll do a couple things. And then someone tipped me something and I was just like, oh, I can vote with this. Oh, I all of a sudden understand. Like, I don't understand where the bank is coming from. I don't understand anything, but I understand that by me holding these tokens, I can now vote, right? And I think like that to me is a big unlock for us. It's something that you can't really do with traditional technology, not in a way that like feels like you actually have ownership in an organization, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, let me hit that one there because that's the thing that I get stuck on sometimes too, right? Like, and just like mechanistically with BCard, like I'm beginning to understand, like, rather than worry about, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like, rather than like for non-tokenized communities, you just use points, right, for voting weight. Essentially, is that true?
That's right, and we may make those points just like we may just create a token for those points if it's technologically better for us.
Yeah, cool. So I think like that's the thing, right? Is like I don't think that people are used to feeling empowered in that same way, right? Like you should, like if you care about, like say you're you're part of some nonprofit, well, the Red Cross, right? The local Red Cross chapter has its own board. You volunteer there sometimes. Like you're deeply invested in helping people with disaster relief efforts. You go to the board meeting, but you got real no say. You got real no voting power. You got nothing, right? I mean, that's the magic in some ways of what we're doing here. Is that through this process, whether it's off-chain or on-chain, like you do get some voting weight, right? And I think one of the challenges, that does require like some thought is, how do you pitch that to communities, who essentially, would go through a form of decentralizing their power structure, right? And why is that good for them? So I think when we think about like materials to ship, I would put that on the list for sure.
And this is exactly the kind of idea that I think that we need to explore the wording on, the messaging on. This is what we really need for growth is to kind of pick away at that, test it, see what sticks, see what doesn't. And this is what I could really use your help with, actually, Hero. We are at the end of time, and I do have to run to another meet. So I need to end it here. But I just want to say thank you to everyone for all the work we're putting in. I think like it's really important to note that we haven't solved it. We haven't figured it out. We are putting the work in to figure it out. Every time that we do something, and like something like an OMF launch, and we don't get new signups from it, that is not a waste of time. In fact, every time we take action, we get more data, we get more information, we get a little bit closer to where we need to be. And so I think that the real key for us right now is to run those experiments as quickly as possible, kind of like reflect and share those results with the team. If we can all do that, and these are things that we can all do independently, but if we can run these kind of experiments and get better and faster and more independent at running these experiments, we're going to actually end up with kind of a supercharged way to find the product market fit that we need to. Everyone in this organization is empowered to do that kind of thing. That is the whole point of building this organization in the way that we did, so that we could empower individuals. So I just want to thank everyone for all the work that they are putting in. And I also want to have a call to action here. If you feel like you want to make BCard better, please do. If there's any way that I can empower you to do so, just let me know. Ultimately, it's not just a product we're building, it is a community that we're building, and that community is meant to be a next generation organization. We are going to show, not tell people what that looks like. We are going to show them the future and welcome them with open arms. And so I just want to thank you all for helping me build it with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynx.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Russ.
Let's keep
Thanks, Lynx.
building it.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
Looking forward to it.